Have you ever felt deeply upset after losing something, even if it had no real value? What if the reason we suffer isn't because things are taken from us, but because we believe they were ever truly ours? And what if even the you think you own isn't really yours to begin with? Nothing belongs to you. A Buddhist reflection. Why do we feel such a strong sense of ownership? From the moment we begin to understand the world, we start collecting things, not only physical items like houses, clothing, or savings, but also invisible ones, memories, beliefs, opinions, and even our identity. We wrap these things around ourselves, convinced they define who we are. We say, my life, my story, my body. But what if none of it ever truly belonged to us? Take a moment to consider your own body. Did you choose its shape, height, or the color of your eyes? Can you command it to never get tired, to stay forever young? No matter how carefully we look after it, it still ages, aches, and sometimes even betrays us. If this body were really ours, wouldn't it listen to us? Even the mind, a place we assume is private and under our control, isn't truly ours. Try sitting quietly and watching your thoughts. You'll notice thoughts appear suddenly, shift unpredictably, and vanish just as quickly. Some are joyful, some uncomfortable, but none ask for your permission before arriving. So if even your mind acts on its own, how much control do you really have? Still, we cling. The mind, like a frightened child, grabs onto things, people, memories, goals, titles, hoping that by holding on tightly, it can protect them from change. But the more we clutch, the more fragile everything seems to become. Relationships bend and break under pressure. Success begins to lose its meaning when we fear it might fade. Even small possessions, a phone, a photo, an old notebook, can cause unease if we believe they define us. This attachment isn't just emotional. Science tells us that when we feel we own something, our brain releases dopamine, the reward chemical that gives us a sense of pleasure and safety. That's why we grow attached even to the most trivial things. Ever lost a cheap pen you liked? It's not the pen itself that frustrates you. It's the mind's desperate urge to keep hold of what feels familiar. There's an old story. A mighty king once boasted that everything in his kingdom belonged to him. In response, a wise sage knelt down, picked up a single grain of sand and asked, "Can you take even this with you when you die?" The king stood silent. That tiny grain shattered a lifetime illusion. No matter how much we claim or accumulate, none of it goes with us. Still, the mind resists this truth. It clings, it grasps, believing control will bring peace. But in reality, the opposite happens. We become anxious, unsettled, and fearful. Picture a monkey reaching into a jar filled with nuts. It grabs a handful, but its clenched fist becomes too big to pull back out. Panicked, the monkey stays stuck, not because the jar is locked, but because it refuses to let go. Our minds are just like that monkey. We get trapped by our own grip, on people, on possessions, on the idea of who we think we are. And we suffer, not because we don't have enough, but because we won't let go. But what does it truly mean to let go? And how can we begin to loosen the mind's grip without feeling like we're losing ourselves? Letting go may feel like loss, but as we saw before, it's the clinging that truly traps us. We often mistake attachment for love. We confuse grasping with safety. The idea of letting go feels terrifying, as if we'll lose everything we care about. But strangely, the opposite is true. The tighter we cling, the more pain we create. This is the heart of our suffering, trying desperately to hold on to things that were never meant to stay. Like water slipping through our fingers, the more we squeeze, the faster it escapes. Nothing in this world can be fully possessed, not forever, not even for long. And the more we try to claim what isn't truly ours, the more restless and uneasy we become. This need to control, this constant reaching and holding on, it wears us down. Peace, real peace, doesn't come from tightening our grip. It comes from changing the way we see. The price of holding on ownership may give us a fleeting sense of security, but behind that comfort hides something much deeper: fear. The more we think we own something, the more we fear losing it. And fear, once rooted in the mind, begins to quietly rule our lives. Picture someone who buys a luxurious watch. At first, they feel proud, satisfied even. But slowly, that joy turns into something heavier. They begin checking it constantly. If they misplace it, even for a moment, anxiety rushes in. The watch no longer brings delight, it brings quiet, constant fear. And this fear isn't just in the mind. Neuroscientific studies show that losing something meaningful can activate the same parts of the brain as physical pain. That's why even small losses, like misplacing a pen or a keepsake, can sting more than expected. The reason? The mind doesn't see these as objects. It sees them as extensions of the self. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus once said, "You may control your thoughts and actions, but everything else, your possessions, your reputation, even your body, is beyond your grasp." His words echo what the Buddha taught. Suffering grows the moment we cling to what we cannot truly control. But this grasping doesn't stop at objects. It seeps into our relationships. A parent, for example, may cling too tightly to their child, trying to protect them by making every choice for them. But this constant control can suffocate the child's independence. What began as love becomes a cage. Or imagine a romantic partner who clings out of fear, seeking constant validation, needing to control where the other person is, what they do, who they speak to. Though rooted in affection, this behavior often leads to resentment, distance, and eventual heartbreak. The tighter we hold, the more we push others away. And it doesn't end with people either. Clinging holds back our growth. Consider someone who once succeeded in their career, but clings so tightly to that success that they refuse to evolve. Afraid of losing their old image, they resist change. They stop taking risks. Or think of someone who sees themselves as tough, so much so that they won't allow themselves to be vulnerable even when they're hurting. They carry their pain alone, trapped by the very identity they're afraid to lose. So how do we begin to let go, gently, wisely, without losing what really matters? Letting go isn't about losing what we love. As we saw earlier, it's about freeing ourselves from the fear of losing it. When we cling tightly to a fixed idea of who we are, we begin to build invisible walls around ourselves. These walls don't just keep others out, they trap us inside. Why do we do this? Why are we so afraid to let go? Because deep down, we believe that holding on equals safety. We convince ourselves that if we control every part of our lives, our relationships, our careers, even our thoughts, we can somehow escape uncertainty, avoid change, and prevent loss. But this belief is an illusion. And the longer we believe it, the more fragile we become. When your sense of peace depends on things that can disappear, possessions, status, approval, then anxiety becomes your constant companion. The mind grows restless, always scanning for threats, always guarding what it fears to lose. You become like someone carrying a heavy bag hour after hour, refusing to set it down. At first, you think you need this burden, that it keeps you safe. But as time passes, the weight becomes harder to bear. Your arms tremble, your breath shortens. You feel tired, yet you keep carrying it. And then, finally, you stop. You put the bag down. The moment you do, the feeling is instant. Lightness, relief, ease. That's what letting go truly feels like. Not loss, but liberation. This is the essence of the Buddha's teaching. He never told us to reject life or run away from people we care about. Instead, he taught us to release our grip, to love fully without needing to control, to care deeply without turning affection into possession. Letting go doesn't mean closing the heart. It means opening your hands. It's about softening the tension within us, about being present with the world as it is, not as we wish to force it to be. In fact, the less we cling, the more we're able to embrace what's right in front of us, with curiosity, kindness, and joy. What happens when we stop clinging? Imagine walking alone through a quiet forest. You're carrying a backpack, heavy and full. But this isn't just any backpack. Inside are stones, and each stone represents something you're holding on to. Your possessions, your past achievements, your relationships, even your beliefs about who you are. At first, the weight feels manageable. You tell yourself, "I've carried this far. I can keep going." But as the trail climbs uphill, your shoulders begin to ache. Your breathing becomes labored. The trees blur. The bird song fades. Everything around you starts to disappear into the background of your pain. Finally, exhausted, you stop. You take off the backpack and let it drop to the forest floor. And suddenly, everything changes. Your back straightens. Your lungs expand. You feel the breeze brush your skin. You smell the pine in the air. You see again. The weight wasn't just in the bag. It was in the belief that you had to carry it. This is what Buddhism teaches us, that clinging is what exhausts us. It's not the world that weighs us down. It's our resistance to its change. We cling to objects, roles, identities, and people, desperately trying to protect a sense of self we believe we need. But the more tightly we hold, the more we suffer. The more we fear, the less we live. Letting go doesn't mean abandoning what matters. It means holding things gently, with grace and humility. It means recognizing that nothing lasts forever. And that's exactly what makes each moment so precious. Even philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre observed how easily we tie our identity to the things we own. We act as if our belongings define our worth. But this creates a fragile self-image, because when the stuff disappears, we feel like we disappear with it. So what happens when we stop clinging, not just to things, but to our very idea of self? What lies beyond the roles we play, the stories we tell, and the masks we wear? We've seen how letting go of possessions and fixed identities brings us relief. But what happens when we lose something we believed was truly ours? When we lose something we feel attached to, whether it's a person, a job, a title, or even a belief, we often feel like a part of us has been torn away. The pain doesn't always come from the thing itself. It comes from the idea that it was part of who we are. The Buddha offered a radical but liberating alternative. No possession, no achievement, no fixed identity ever truly defines who we are. This is the essence of the teaching on non-self, an insight that shakes the very foundation of how we see ourselves. Our identity isn't a fixed object. It's not something we can wrap in a box, label, and protect. It's not our name, our story, or even our thoughts. And when we stop trying to lock it down, we discover something unexpected: freedom. There's a powerful story that illustrates this. One day, a wealthy merchant came to the Buddha, visibly disturbed. "Master," he said, "I cannot sleep. My heart is never at ease. I am constantly afraid. What if thieves steal my treasures? What if I lose everything I've worked for?" The Buddha listened patiently, then replied with a simple sentence: "Then give away what you cannot keep." Startled, the merchant believed the Buddha was telling him to give away his fortune. But the true teaching was far deeper than a command to abandon wealth. The Buddha was inviting him to release the mental burden, the attachment, the belief that his treasures defined who he was. Whether he kept his riches or gave them away was not the real issue. The key was loosening the grip of identification. Letting go doesn't mean we walk away from life or become indifferent. In fact, it often brings us closer to life. Take the example of a parent. When love turns into control, when a parent clings too tightly, demanding obedience, shielding the child from every discomfort, what was once love becomes restriction. The child feels suffocated. But when a parent allows space, trusts, and nurtures without trying to possess, something beautiful happens. The child grows. The bond strengthens. Love deepens. Not because of control, but because of freedom. The same is true in friendships, in careers, and even within our own self-image. Love grows when it's not weighed down by fear. Growth happens when we stop defending a fixed idea of who we think we should be. Even our inner turmoil, anxiety, restlessness, overwhelm often stems from clinging. The anxious mind is a mind that clings. It plays out scenarios, fears outcomes, obsesses over what might go wrong. Restlessness? It's the mind refusing to be still, always searching, reaching, resisting what is. Letting go doesn't mean we fight these feelings. It means we stop trying to control them. Like a tight fist slowly relaxing, the mind begins to soften. And in that release, peace naturally follows. One of the most beautiful reminders of this truth comes from nature. Look at a bird in flight. It carries nothing, yet it soars with grace. It builds a nest in spring, but when the season shifts, it leaves without clinging, without sorrow. The bird doesn't suffer from detachment. It trusts. It adapts. Its lightness comes not from indifference, but from wisdom. The wisdom to let life unfold without grasping. In much the same way, our lives become lighter when we stop holding so tightly. Letting go doesn't mean life loses its meaning. It means we stop living with the constant fear of losing what was never truly ours to begin with. And in that release, we discover something far more valuable than ownership or control. We find peace. So what is the final truth behind all this letting go? What happens when we truly realize that nothing ever really belonged to us? We uncovered a deep truth. Nothing ever truly belonged to us. And it's in this realization that we find freedom, not fear. Everything in life changes. Loved ones grow old or drift away. Bodies age, weaken, and change. Wealth comes and goes. The things we once clung to so tightly eventually slip beyond our grasp. Many people feel anxious or hopeless in the face of this truth. But the Buddha saw it differently. He didn't see impermanence as a reason to despair, but as the pathway to peace. After all, if we cannot keep something forever, can we truly say it was ever ours? Think of someone who rents a house. They furnish it, decorate it, make memories inside its walls. They grow attached, but deep down, they always know. One day, they will have to leave. No matter how much love they've poured into that space, the house was never truly theirs. This is how life works. Everything we cling to is, in a sense, borrowed. Our careers, our belongings, even the people around us, none of it is ours to keep. The Buddha expressed this clearly in the Dhammapada, saying, "When one sees with wisdom that all conditioned things are impermanent, one turns away from suffering." This doesn't mean we must reject the world or shut ourselves off emotionally. It simply means we begin to see clearly. Everything we hold on to is temporary. And when we recognize that truth, not just intellectually, but through direct experience, suffering begins to loosen its grip. This understanding doesn't leave us feeling empty. In fact, it points us toward a deeper, richer kind of wealth, the freedom that arises when we stop clinging. One way the Buddha encouraged this was through the practice of generosity, dana in Pali, not just as a moral virtue, but as a profound tool to dissolve attachment. Every time we give, whether it's our money, time, energy, or even just a kind word, we chip away at the mind's habit of grasping. Generosity isn't about giving up everything. It's about learning to hold with open hands rather than clenched fists. But this letting go extends beyond material things. It also involves releasing our grip on identity. Every time we say, "I am this way," or "things must be like this," we're reinforcing a mental cage, a self-image we feel the need to defend. The Buddha taught that this fixed sense of self is just another illusion of ownership. And like all things, it changes. The thoughts you had 5 years ago are not the same thoughts you have today. The version of you that existed as a child, it's long gone. So if you keep changing, what exactly are you holding on to? When we see this clearly, the need to protect a rigid identity begins to fade. The mind softens. We become more open, more adaptable, free to meet each moment as it is, not as we demand it to be. To help develop this insight, the Buddha encouraged contemplating impermanence, anicca. This doesn't mean dwelling on death or loss. It simply means noticing change as it happens. Watch your breath, rising, falling. Notice a thought, appearing, lingering, dissolving. Even your emotions, no matter how powerful, eventually fade like waves returning to the sea. And through this quiet observation, we start to see nothing, not even me, is truly solid or permanent. And the more clearly we see this, the less tightly we cling. If you want to try this out for yourself, here's a simple and profound practice. For just one day, softly repeat to yourself, "This does not belong to me." When you pick up your phone, "This does not belong to me." When you sip your coffee, glance at your reflection or speak to a loved one. "This does not belong to me." This isn't about distancing yourself from life. It's about meeting life with open hands and a quiet, knowing heart. But what happens when we take this practice deeper? When we stop grasping and instead allow everything to come and go? In the last part, we learn to gently repeat, "This does not belong to me," as a way of softening the mind's grip. But what happens when we apply this practice not just to objects, but to our emotions? When anger rises, when joy bursts forth, or when fear creeps in, pause for a moment, feel it, see it, and then softly whisper to yourself, "This does not belong to me." This simple phrase is not a rejection of life. It's not about becoming cold or detached. It's about loosening the knot inside, the tight clenching of the mind that says, "This is mine. This defines me." Instead, you begin to see your experiences, emotions, thoughts, sensations like water passing through open hands. They arrive, they linger, and then they leave. At first, this practice may feel strange. You might feel unsettled, even resistant. The ego is used to attaching, to labeling, to clinging. Letting go feels unfamiliar. But if you stay with it, patiently, gently, something extraordinary begins to unfold. A lightness enters. A sense of inner space begins to grow. Fear starts to soften. Anxiety loosens its grip. The mind, once restless and tense, finds a calm it never knew was possible. And this calm doesn't come from pushing life away. It comes from no longer trying to trap it, from allowing everything to flow just as it does in nature, moment by moment. The Buddha never promised that this freedom would arrive overnight. It isn't instant. It takes intention, attention, practice. But each time you pause and remember that nothing truly belongs to you, you take one more step toward peace. In the end, this truth doesn't strip us of joy. It reveals a deeper kind of joy. Nothing ever truly belonged to us. Not our wealth, not our titles, not even the people we love or the body we live in. And strangely enough, when we stop clinging, we don't feel empty. We feel free. This isn't giving up. It's waking up. It's finally seeing the world not through the eyes of fear, but through the eyes of clarity. It's living with open hands and an open heart. In the next and final part, we'll reflect on how to carry this insight into daily life and how, with practice, freedom becomes not just a momentary feeling, but a way of being. If this message touched something in you, help it reach others too. Click like, share this video with someone you care about, and subscribe to Buddhism Seeds for more reflections like this. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. What part of this teaching resonated most with you? Drop a comment below. Let's grow this journey together.